Joel Klatt, Fox Sports lead college football analyst. He'll be on the call with Gus, big noon kickoff in Ann Arbor, Texas, and Michigan. Let me ask you about Lamar Jackson and that style. Like, how would you, if somebody didn't see Lamar, how would you describe his style?
Oh, gosh, that's a great question. I would describe his style as conflict. He's constantly putting the defense in conflict because of his ability to impact with his legs. Now, I've been a big believer, and I talk a lot with Daniel Jeremiah about this when we lead up to the draft, because listen, I'm in the college game, so that style in college is probably preferable, to be honest with you. But as you go on, DJ and I like to play this like confetti test in the draft. And we take a look at all the quarterbacks leading up into the draft. And we're like, okay, close your eyes and picture the confetti raining down. Can you picture him winning a Super Bowl? His style of play, his personality, all of the things that we try to evaluate in the draft process. And with Lamar, there's one thing that sticks out at times, which is, at some point in the playoffs, and this goes for any player, you're going to have to, as a quarterback, control the game from the pocket. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't impact the game outside of the pocket, but at some point you will have to control the game from the pocket. And I think that, to your point, regular season versus postseason, there are times when maybe that's lacking. But to be fair, it's like I don't study the tape of those NFL playoff games. That's from afar, sitting there as a fan watching some of those games.
All right, so you have the big game at noon. It's going to be Texas and Michigan. Texas is favored by 7. Does that point spread say more about Texas or more about Michigan?
Probably a little of both, to ride both sides of that fence. I think Texas looked really efficient and in control and physical, and they looked like a team that resembled what Alabama has been in the past, and that's kind of what Sark wants to do, and build a team that's versatile, can do a lot of things, play physical, play fast, all of the things that you would need to go win a national championship. Meanwhile, I think that we looked at what Michigan was as 15-0 national champion, with guys that could take them above their style and philosophy, like Corum and McCarthy and these guys. And then we watched them against Fresno State, and Dan, to me, it resembled a lot of the 2015-16 early Harbaugh Michigan teams. Mm-hmm. Journeyman quarterback, Jake Rudock, remember him? He was a transfer from Iowa. Wilton Spate was a quarterback back in 16. Those teams were good and philosophically really sound, but they lacked some of the pieces that could take them above their philosophy and their X's and O's. That's what it looked like kind of on Saturday night against Fresno State, and I think that's why you're seeing the line where it's at.
Let's do the confetti test with Quinn Ewers. Close your eyes. Okay. Can you see Quinn Ewers with confetti raining down upon him this season?
Well, wait. Which confetti? Are we talking about the little mini Lombardi Trophy confettis that somebody cuts out, which is incredible? Or are we talking about like the square college football confetti that's cheaper?
Square, yeah, the cheaper version.
Okay.
For a national championship, can you see confetti raining down on him?
I can. I think that this Texas team is very versatile. I think that they're deep. They've got probably, I would say, the most experienced offensive line in the country. Certainly, they got 4 guys that have started for the better part of 3 years up front in front of him. And their most talented guy might be the 5th that isn't one of those experienced guys. I think that the only thing that is concerning for Michigan is that they're having to replace Byron Murphy and Trevondre Sweat. They're 2 defensive tackles. And you might be thinking to yourself, like, well, what do you mean? In our game, in the college game, it's not necessarily about your quarterback, although that's important. The national champion always has an elite interior defensive line that can control the game. We saw that last year with Michigan. We saw it the 2 previous years with Georgia. And so Texas is going to have to overcome losing those 2 guys. Might not be all about Quinn Ewers as much as it is that defense, which is what I'm excited about for Saturday, Dan, because that's exactly where Michigan is going to probe, and they're going to try to soften up. That's their entire MO, is to try to control the game at the line of scrimmage. So that aspect of Texas's team is going to be tested.
I said after, the Monday after watching USC play, they won the perception. Like the perception victory of the weekend was USC because we saw them be tough. We saw them play defense. as opposed to the last couple of years. I don't know how much a perception victory counts. It's still one win, but it did feel like USC addressed a lot of the issues that we've been waiting for them to address. Are they a
I
real
couldn't
player?
agree more. Yeah, I think so. And I think, to your point, on two different fronts, Dan, I think that there's, now all of a sudden the Big Ten is really a 5-team race, not a 4-team race. So all of a sudden the top end of the Big Ten looks much more difficult for teams like Penn State, Ohio State, Oregon, and Michigan. And then you have this narrative that starts. And remember, our sport is still subjective, and we're still going to put teams into this playoff, even though it's expanded through subjective measurements. And when you beat a team like LSU from that conference, the SEC, that's huge not only for your program, but also for the conference, because those two teams coming into the season, USC and LSU, were largely thought of in a very similar spot within their conference, maybe 4, 5, 6, right in that range. So if you can win those games, it becomes really important from a narrative standpoint to see how many teams your conference can get into the playoff at the end of the season. So twofold on that, and I thought that the defense played tremendous. Didn't we kind of forget we are so, man, our brains move so fast. It's a quick-paced society. Everyone's like, oh, man, Lincoln Riley can't coach. It's like, hold on, time out. Yes, he can, and he has for the entirety of his career. And now all of a sudden, if he gets a defense that can play that tough, then I think the rest of the Big Ten certainly was put on notice.
What would be a successful season for Colorado?
Oh, gosh, that's a great question. Before last Thursday, I would have said they could win 8 or 9 games. After last Thursday, I'm less confident. And the reason is while they have elite players, I think they have 2 players that might get selected in the top 5 in the NFL draft, Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders. Outside of that, they tend to make the exact same mistakes and play the exact same style that we saw even early last year. And that growth hasn't really occurred. They mismanage the clock. They don't have a creative run game, so they throw the ball constantly when they have to rather than when they want to. If you wanted to give them some kudos, you would say their run defense was a lot better this year, in particular against a team, even though they were FCS, but North Dakota State is, I think all of us know that are sports fans, they're a tough-minded, run-oriented program that's highly successful. But those things about the clock management, the undisciplined play at times, in particular, like a few of those penalties on 3rd down, if they do that against Nebraska, they're going to get beat, maybe handily, because Matt Rule's built something pretty special, at least I think, in Lincoln, in particular with a freshman quarterback. If Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter play elite football, they can beat almost anybody on their schedule, but everything else has to get better. So I think that a successful season for Colorado right now is probably a bowl game.
Feels like this 12-team playoff is meant for Notre Dame to be in there every single year.
Yeah.
It was almost, this is TV. It's a TV show, and you want Notre Dame to host a playoff game. It just feels like Notre Dame is, are you okay with that? Do you get the same feeling that, hey, SEC's going to be represented, Big Ten's going to be represented, Notre Dame's going to be in there, get a couple of outliers?
Most likely they are. I'm really interested to see what happens. Let me just peer into the future before I answer your question specifically. I peer into the future. I just sense and feel within the next 4 or 5 years, Notre Dame will have more of a scheduling arrangement with a conference that will make their schedule more difficult. So there's that, because this is it's not necessarily the problem of Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame's really good. Marcus Freeman is a heck of a coach, obviously, and that defense looked elite. And so I have no problem with Notre Dame being in the playoff. And quite frankly, they probably will be ranked higher than what their seed is. I think they're probably going to be ranked in the top 4 because I don't know who's going to beat them on their schedule. The issue is their schedule. Their toughest game, at least before the season, was probably this road game at Texas A&M. Now it looks like it's the road game at the end of the year at USC. But between those 2 bookend games, Dan, with Florida State losing twice, it's like 10 straight scrimmages. I know that sounds harsh, but that schedule, it's totally in their court. If they want to play and hold their own standard, they'll be undefeated facing USC, and they're going to be in the playoff.
Appalachian State at Clemson tomorrow night. If Clemson loses tomorrow night.
Could you repeat that real quick? You cut out for a moment.
Appalachian State, Clemson, if Clemson loses tomorrow night.
Oh, my gosh. Oh, my gosh. Don't do that to me. I can't comprehend. You know what Clemson reminds me of, Dan? They remind me a lot of 2010 Texas. Texas had that 6-year run with elite level quarterback play, Vince Young to Colt McCoy. But what ended up happening is over those 6 years, the program's roster started to deteriorate, but we didn't know it because Colt carried them. And he carried them to that national championship game. He gets hurt. They lose to Alabama. And we thought that Garrett Gilbert was going to be like, well, he'll be fine because he's a 5-star and, he's Texas's quarterback. And they fell off the face of the planet, and it took them until last year really to kind of like right the ship.
Mm.
The key is that Texas missed on recruiting a quarterback. And I think Clemson has done the same. Now, Cade Klubnik, I'm hoping that this turns around, but this is what happened with Deshaun Watson to Trevor Lawrence. And at the end of Trevor's tenure, yes, they made the national championship game, but he carried them past that Ohio State team. He carried them to that point. And you look at the draft picks since he's left, and it's fallen off the face of the planet, just like Texas. Texas went like 10 years without an offensive player drafted until last year. And we're starting to see that with Clemson. So to me, it's not about Dabo in the transfer portal or he's unwilling to do this or that. It's that they've missed at quarterback. We didn't see the deterioration of the roster like we didn't see it at Texas. And I think that's the issue. And I tell you what, this is not the game I would want to play if I was Clemson after losing to Georgia. App State's going to be ready to play. Wouldn't shock me if they beat Clemson, but at the same time, I think that the Tigers, at least I hope the Tigers right the ship for their sake.
Tell Gus we said hello. Have fun tomorrow. We'll be watching. Thank you. Great appearance, Joel.
I will.
All right.
I appreciate it, Dan. Have a good one, bud.
That's Joel Klatt, Fox Sports lead college football analyst, and it'll be Fox's big noon kickoff in Ann Arbor. It's Texas, Michigan. We'll come back, got our play of the day. We'll settle on our poll question, your phone calls as well. Rich Eisen will join us coming up next hour. We're back after this.